Jyotir. Nishta Presho Bhadvesu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavati Tamashuki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. Nigamalka Padurgari Shukamakara Mitajavi
Sevya
Samikam
Bhagavati
Pivata
Tamashuki.
Bhagatam Rashamarya Mahora Horisikubbivakam. Krishna Swadam Bhagade Damagane Karonashta Dishamasha Parana Kodinodidam. Tvamapyadabhishuta Vishutam Vivo Samapyanana Bidambidiksharam Prakyahidaho Moidanam Sanklesha Nirvanam Santi Nanyata. Om Maganati Mirandasya Anganagana Sarakya Chaksurun Militam Yanatashmai Shri Guruvedama Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yana Bhutare Shayam Rupa Kadamyam Darati Swapanadikam Vandeham Shri Guru Siyata Parakamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sha Shri Rupam Jagadam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Sabrutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Sta Namaham Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamita Namaste Sarasati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nirvishesa Sunyavadi Praskita Desarani Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Good morning. This is New Year's Eve. Another revolution of the time factor. Tomorrow starts 2025, and we always started in the best way possible by chanting as many names of God as we can. Last year, I think the combined congregation of Salt Lake and Spanish Fork chanted about 3.4 million names of God. Hopefully, we can do better than that this year. Salt Lake City did 1,300 rounds, and we did 600 rounds, Spanish Fork. So we're getting slaughtered in a good way every year. So chant rounds at home and try to come to either temple for arti and a nice lunch. Then chant together with the devotees between 1 and 3. And then if you like, go home, finish up, and then call in either Rasamrita in Salt Lake City or myself by 8 o'clock with your final tally, and we'll all put it on our respective boards and then compare notes and add everything up, get the results the following morning. The details are on our Facebook page. Good luck. May the best man win. No, I'm just kidding. Everybody wins. Not only those who chant multiple rounds, but those on whose behalf we chant them. Basically, and roughly, we get one mantra chanted for every man, woman, person in Utah. Yesterday, just to catch up, good morning, Lila, who has a new job in a real estate company. Yay. Shali has a new deity gracing her home. Ballava Chandra has got a new trip underway to India, I think in June, right after the Festival of Color in Salt Lake City. And Britta, who's got all kinds of new things going on every single day. Britta's giving me some nice feedback on the radio station. Literally, we're mass producing. I went through some of the talks that I've given. There's over 600 talks, motivational talks. There is material for 600 songs. The Vaishnav, the songs of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Narottam Das Thakur. There's hundreds and hundreds of songs there. I made about 4 or 5 of the most popular songs into English translation. We're churning out like half a dozen new songs every day. So if you have an opportunity, listen to the radio station. You won't be disappointed. Anywhere it's Wi-Fi, it's available. You just have to download one of these apps that lets you listen. Look for 1480 KHQN, Radio Krishna. Yeah, catching up from yesterday, we talked about how vacancy is not happiness. Nature abhors a vacuum. There's no such thing as a vacuum in nature. You may aspire to do nothing, think nothing, converse not at all with your fellow human beings, sustain yourself by eating nourishment which is provided by the environment. Try to reduce that to zero. But you can't. It's just not possible. to take yourself out of the game. You might be sitting on the sidelines, you might be sitting in the stands, you might be sitting out back behind the urinal, but the point is, you're a living being, you're a sentient being. You can't not be you. So there's a basic flaw, what do they call it? Oxymoron. To, to, as a soul, to try to stop sentiency, consciousness, cogitation, emotions is impossible. It's built into your very self. That's how God made you. He didn't make you to be impersonal or to be a nothing. He made you in his image. Krishna, in case you haven't noticed, is full of personalities. It wasn't for nothing that Prabhupada always repeatedly, you think Prabhupada's trying to make a point here? Quite possibly. Krishna, does he leave it there? He does not. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How many times do you read Krishna, comma, Supreme Personality of Godhead? The book, practically the second book that Prabhupada published, which gives you an idea of how important he considered it. Publication was paid for by George Harrison, the Beatles. Krishna, subtitle, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if God's bursting with personality, how could it be that the emanations, the sparks, the particles coming from him are without personality? It's about as logical to think as that the rays from the sunshine are cold. What the rays do is they carry the sunshine, whatever it is, 93 million miles away, to the earth. The sun appears on the earth due to its representatives, you might say, the particles of sunshine. We feel warmth, we feel nourishment. People often tell me, this is an aside, but people say, why don't you have your festival of colors later on in the year when the weather's bound to be better? Because sometimes it's not ideal in March. And I tell people want to get out. It's December, January, February, all of March. We have our festival the last weekend in March. People have been inside for the most part. It's been cold. They've been restricted. They've been confined in terms of their activities. And they want to at least symbolically, even if the weather isn't that good, they want to at least symbolically celebrate and welcome and lay out the red carpet for spring, even though there may or may not have been a sign of it. Most times we do get uncharacteristically warm weather by the grace of the Lord. But we did have one year, at least it was a high of 30 degrees throughout the entire weekend, snow, mud, and rain. But that's a chance I'm willing to take because you have a major festival celebrating spring and warmth and rejuvenation and renaissance at the end of March. People are going to come just for the symbolism of it, if no other reason. Even the year that it was 30 degrees, it was raining, it was snowing, it was muddy. There were young kids, I don't recommend this, but there were young kids out there in tank tops and mini skirts dancing in the mud in the snow because they wanted to make a statement. Life is about joy. Life is about celebration. And we have to not be conditioned by the environment. It may be stormy, it may be muddy, it may be snowy, but we need to learn the art in life of being happy, of being cheerful, of being buoyant, of being celebratory, even in the middle of the storm. So even when the weather is bad, there's a lesson to be learned there. However the weather is, good, bad, or in between, it's kind of like a passion play where we're reflecting various life's lessons. And so I wouldn't have it any other time than the last weekend of March. And yes, of course, there's a greater chance of inclement weather. But the advantage is, from a marketing point of view, as a longtime festival organizer of over 55 years, I think there's no greater advantage than being, read my lips, the only game in town. There are no other major outdoor festivals in March. In fact, you'll be hard pressed to find anyone in April, and they just start to appear, little sprinklings of them in May, and most of them on any given weekend in June. You'll be competing with about 20 different festivals going on at the same time. So I'm willing to take the risk of inclement weather. Did I tell you that even on that weekend when things were bad, we had 6,500 attendees, which of course wasn't bad at all. And in spite of the weather, and in many cases because of the weather, we had a great time. I can tell you one thing, I remember that year more distinctly than I remember the years when the weather was good and there were no challenges. So there's always the upside. Krishna doesn't do anything without a reason. So to suggest that happiness lies in doing nothing, speaking nothing, eating nothing, pushing down, suffocating your personality is, I don't know, what should I say? Should I be bold and say it's absurd? Here's an absurdity. A Buddhist who believes in nirvana. Nirvana, as I explained yesterday, nirvana means arrows. Arrows are always manufactured for causing pain. You might say that's the dharma of the arrow. Just like the dharma of chili is spiciness, the dharma of water is wetness, the dharma of sugar is sweetness, the dharma of an arrow is pain. That's what an arrow is created for. So nirvana, the Buddhist term, means no pain, but it also means nothingness. Yesterday we talked about Steve Jobs, who as a young man went to India wanting to find happiness. And he came to a Buddhist or a nihilistic ashram, asked them the question, the perennial question, how do I find happiness? And they said, unhappiness comes from wrong actions. So if you don't do any actions, you won't get unhappiness. Now, did you notice in that logic there's something missing? First premise is that wrong results, misery, suffering is the harvest of wrong actions that you performed in the past, because we've acted without regard, without consideration of universal laws and the sovereignty of other living beings who are children of God. We offended. We caused pain and suffering, and then that came full circle. The suffering that we have in our lives is not accidental. It's the function of the law of karma. What goes around comes around. You sowed the seed, you face the deed. Whatever you do comes back to you. The law of cause and effect ensures the balance is perfect. Detecting whatever you do, good and bad, it will resurrect. So the Buddhists or the nihilists or the impersonalists, they recognize, and this is correct as far as it goes, that misery is the result of bad choices we've made in the past. So if we want to eliminate misery, then don't make any bad choices. And the best way not to make any bad choices is not to make any choices at all. Okay, so don't make any choices, don't sow any seeds, don't get anything back. Okay, but you didn't answer the question. How do I find happiness? What your answer was how to not even stop suffering, because by being impersonal or inactive, suppressing all of your sentiency, you're not going to stop suffering. You're just going to have a timeout, that's all, until you get bored. Then you're going to go roaring back into active life. But let's say, for argument's sake, if you stop activity, you stop sowing the wrong seeds, you'll stop negative reactions coming back to you. But that still doesn't answer the question. How do I attain happiness? Anyway, for a time, Steve Jobs took the answer as gospel. He tried doing nothing, but later on in his autobiography, he confessed that I was bored out of my mind. So he left the ashram and came back and he started Apple computers. At least it was an engagement. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't evocative of happiness, but he had to do something. He had to do something. The urge is irrepressible. The spiritual life is not the same as stopping material life. Vacancy is not equate to happiness. If material life, acting without reference to the creator, there's so much order in this world, and the order indicates an ordainer. So the ordainer has created an orderly world, obviously with certain purposes in mind. Who creates without a purpose? Every creation, by definition, is created for a purpose. That's just self-explanatory. That's just self-evident. So the ordainer, the intelligent designer, the Supreme Lord, whom Prabhupada calls the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has created spiritual and material worlds. Out of his own spiritual self have come millions and millions of sentient living beings. And we have to consider, what is our purpose? Simply dropping out or going sitting behind the urinals at the Friday night high school football game is not helpful. It's not helping anybody. We need to ask, what is my purpose? What is the purpose behind both the material and spiritual energies? And that's how we'll find our path to happiness, is to step into the middle of your purpose. Imagine a harmonium. Imagine if a harmonium had feelings. Harmonium is a little portable organ, and it has some weight to it. It weighs maybe 10, 12 pounds. So imagine if a harmonium was just used as a paperweight. Imagine if a harmonium was just used to hold down a stack of papers. A harmonium has reeds, it has keys, it has higher notes, it has lower notes, it has sometimes it has a scale changer, it has a bellows. It's an intricate, sophisticated, manufactured instrument. It was crafted with great care and attention by expert craftsmen and produced for the purpose of making beautiful sound. So re mi fa la ti do, to re mi fa so la ti re. If you've ever, you can go on YouTube and type harmonium, all kinds of beautiful sounds. Imagine the harmonium just sitting there. Uh, instead of instead of being appreciated for all the range and scales of beautiful music that it can create, the only part of it that's acknowledged or appreciated is its weight. But a rock could do the same thing. It just comes to my mind in the course of, working through this analogy that, our practice of eating meats is the same. We are the living graves of murdered beasts, slaughtered, satisfied for appetites whenever paused to wonder at a piece of animals like humans have rights. Animals are not any different than we are. We like to eat, animals like to eat. We like to mate, animals like to mate. We have to defend sometimes. Animals have to defend. Uh, we like to sleep, animals sleep. Where's the difference between ourselves and animals? Animals are complex beings. We have lots of animals here on the property. The ones probably I'm most familiar with are the parrots, and the parrot, which is insanely attached to me. He won't even let anyone pick him up, is our blue and gold scarlet matra, Pedro. Pedro, he won't he won't basically interact with anybody unless I'm traveling, then he defaults to number two or so. And I spent enough time with Pedro to know that he's an incredibly complex living being. He's very sophisticated in his own way. He's quite intelligent in his own way, and he feels, oh my God, he feels as strongly, if not more strongly than me. He may not have the same range of emotions, the same subtlety of emotions, but he feels with power. He feels with strength. To think that in the millions on a daily basis, intelligent, sentient, loving, trusting living beings like Pedro are without any thought or consideration or respect or even a how do you do, their necks are, I don't even want to talk about it. It's just appalling. It's just appalling. I'll just finish the poem. We are the living graves of murdered beasts, sought to satisfy appetites who never pause to wonder at our feasts of animals like humans have rights. We pray on Sundays and we have light to guide our footsteps on the path of tread. We're sick of war and we don't want to fight, and yet we gorge ourselves on the dead. Like carrion crow, we live in feed and meat, never considering the pain and suffering because of us who treat defenseless animals as sport or gain. How can we hope to obtain the peace we are so anxious for? So in the same way that materialists and meat eaters and sense gratifiers brush away, ignore the very obvious fact that the animals they eat are not just flesh. They're not just flesh. There's so much more. To reduce them just to a few bites in your mouth at lunch, which you can't even finish, is inconscionable. And so in an analogous way for the impersonalists of the Buddhists, to wipe away, to ignore, to repress, to discount all the wide range of emotions that we have is appalling. It's unconscionable. It's death dealing. It's life denying. That's why we get a little hot under the collar whenever we dive into the subject matter. Prabhupada was the same. Prabhupada was the same. He would say, you may wonder why I spend so much time ranting and raving against impersonalism and nihilism. It's because although it may not be articulated in the Western countries as much as it is in India it's been systematized and it's been institutionalized and it's been accepted by large numbers of people and passed down from generation to generation. Nothing so formal has ever evolved in the Western countries, but nevertheless, pretty much everybody is a soul denier, a life denier, a death embracer because of failing to acknowledge the soul. And meat eating is a big part of it. Nirvita tarshira bhagiyamana bhavosho chotamana cow tamashogana punarvanajapanapishidan. Question is asked. Krishna is the most transcendental, effulgent, personable living being ever. From him, all other personality comes. He's the supreme, attractive living being. There isn't anything that you like about your husband, your sister, your wife, your friend, your children, which didn't have its origin in Krishna. So Krishna is the supreme, attractive object. And we're drawn to him automatically, just like iron filings are drawn to a magnet. So to try to resist that pull, the iron filing feels the pull. Why would he try to resist that? It's the most natural thing in the world. Why would the iron filing try to grab onto a bush or a leaf or a floor with its nails and try to avoid being pulled to the magnet? We're persons. Krishna is the supreme person. Manasa Deho Geho Yoki Chumor. It's one of the songs that I translate into English, put to a reggae or a house or a soul beat, and we're going to upload it to the radio station today. Manasa Geho Deo Yoki Chumor. You're my father, my mother, my sister, my brother, my grandfather, my any rasa, any flavor that we get from any sort of relationship, it's there in Krishna multiplied millions and millions of times over. Imagine if you were covered with 20 blankets, okay? Just hypothetically, imagine you had to go through your day being covered by 20 blankets, okay? How frustrating that would be for eating, for walking, for running. How could I type on the computer if I had 20 blankets covered, if I had to type through 20 blankets? How could I speak to someone if I had to speak through 20 blankets? The person would only hear how frustrating it would be. So one solution would be don't try to do anything. Don't try to speak to anyone. Don't try to walk. Don't try to do anything at the computer. Just sit down and do nothing. That would be one option. But how long could you do that? So unnatural. You want to walk, you want to interact, you want to speak, you want to communicate, you want to be heard and you want to hear. So here's a much better solution. Instead of just giving up and sitting down in one place, doing nothing, throw off the blankets. Hello? Then you can run and jump and leap and frolic and talk and eat and do whatever you want. So similarly, we're covered by 8 blankets, metaphorically speaking. The soul, the spirit soul, which itself has form and arms and legs and hands, is covered by earth, air, fire, water, ether, mind, intelligence. Let me hold on a second. Sorry, the little disturbances there. It was covered by earth, air, fire, water, mind, intelligence, false ego. So we're going through life with all these blankets, all these coverings over us, and we're trying to get happiness. So we go to the Buddhists or the nihilists and they say, how to get happiness? And they say, well, just sit down. If you sit down and don't try to speak, don't try to eat, don't try to walk, don't try to enter, then you won't be frustrated, which may be true up to a certain point. But after a while, you're going to, anyone can see it's not going to work. But you go to a devotee, and a devotee says, hey, just get rid of the blankets. Don't give up running and talking and communicating and loving and hating, and don't give up all that stuff. Just give up that which impedes it. Just gives up that which keeps you from doing it on the highest possible level. Imagine if you're underwater, let's take another hypothetical situation. You're underwater, you know, and it takes so much energy to move from 10 or 20 feet. You have to go against the downward pull of the water. How do you breathe? You might have to take some oxygen tank. And one solution would be, well, don't try and move in the water, just stay in one place. But another solution is get out of the water. You're you're not a denizen of the water, you're a denizen of the land. How liberating it is to get out of the artificial environment of the water and get on the land. One more example. Most of us, when we were kids, I know I did on a few occasions, participate in a sack race. A sack race means you're racing, but you're tied, your legs are tied in a sack, so you can't put one leg in front of another. The only way you can go forward is hopping. And sack races are popular because they're so hilarious. I mean, to see, instead of running normally and effortlessly and gracefully and flawlessly, there's all these people like jumping awkwardly, and balance is a big part. When your legs and your feet are unfettered, untied, you can always keep balance. You make, your body unconsciously has its own intelligence, and it keeps the balance while you're moving forward. But when you're artificially restrained with bindings around your thighs and knees and calves and feet, it's hard to keep your balance. And so to see people tottering and swaying and veering off course, and look at their faces as they're going down and hear their screams, it's funny just to even think about it. So if someone's saying, man, someone's, living their whole life, they're trying to drive their car, they're trying to work, they're trying to cook, they're trying to play, recreate, with their legs tied up in a sack, they'll eventually want to know, how can I, this is terribly frustrating. How can I avoid the frustration of falling and losing my balance and hurting myself? My elbow's still sore from that tumble I took yesterday. Someone may say, well, don't do anything. Just sit in your easy chair, have someone bring you your food and just watch TV all day. Well, that's true. That by doing that, you won't have the frustrations of mobility anymore. But you'll have a worse frustration, is boredom, lack of activity, and how unhealthy you're going to get sitting in one place, filling yourself with junk food, watching the idiot tube. It's not a solution. Just take off the sack. take off the bindings and get back to normal mobility. This is our message. You are an active, living being. God, this is a supreme personality, Godhead. You have personality. God moves. Krishna book is full of all kinds of activities. One time, Krishna jumps off of a mountain 84 miles high. Another time, he swallows a forest fire. Another time, he lifts a mountain. There's Krishna book is full of activities, supernatural, wonderful, amazing activities of the Supreme Personality of God. And the most amazing part are his relationships with hundreds and thousands of devotees. How we can even maintain one relationship is a challenge. And most of us fail during a lifetime of marriage or espousal. Krishna maintained relationships with thousands and thousands of devotees, and they were so happy, so satisfied. None of them had a complaint, save and except for the fact that they wanted more and more and more and more and more and more of Krishna. This is our practical solution. How to find happiness, the perennial question. Vacancy is not a path to anything, much less a path to happiness. Simply giving up material activities does not establish a spiritual fact. Happiness is not just to step away from suffering, but it's to accept the normal, natural, wholesome activities of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of God. One more example, and then we'll wind up here. If a pot has contained poison, it's not enough just to empty the pot. You cannot drink from that pot that has been filled with poison. Even though you may have emptied most of the poison from the pot, still it would have seeped into, it would have permeated, especially the clay pot, the pores of the pot. You cannot use that pot to drink afterwards. It's not as sufficient just to empty the pot. You have to empty the pot, that's true. Then you have to clean the pot very, very scrupulously. Get some soap and water, something very abrasive, and get in there and elbow grease. If you're not diligent about cleaning the pot, you're going to take one sip, you're going to drop dead, and then fill that pot with nectar. So our heart is like a pot of poison. How many unworthy, degraded thoughts we have every day? Our heart, you might say mind, but the mind, all thought process, all feelings emanate chitta, from the heart. Cheto Darpana Marjam. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says we have to solve all of our wayward tendencies to make bad decisions. We're at the place at which they start. For instance, you can't stop a wave at the beach. You can't stop a wave. Once the wave has progressed as far as the beach, there's no way to stop it. You want to stop the wave, you have to go back 2 miles out offshore. Stop it from that first little swell. Similarly, by the time the desires have reached your mind, it's too late to stop them. The place to stop them is in the heart. That's where everything starts. They say, nip it in the bud. So we have to recognize that thoughts, sensations, feelings start in the heart. But if your heart is dirty, then those things will come out tinted. Instead of a clear, wholesome, uplifting, illuminating, bright light of the soul, if you have dirty things in the heart, then the pristine light of the soul becomes tinted, becomes altered as it's filtered to the dirtiness of the heart. And then as it expresses itself through the mind and the senses, we do things that are charitably described as entangling, uncharitably described as appalling, abominable, evil. So the whole point is you don't solve the dirty heart problem by stopping activities. You solve the dirty heart problem by engaging in the positive alternative of devotional service. Param Drishva Nivarjate. If you've been eating old stale bread for years and years and years, someone can't really come up to you and convincingly say, you've got all kinds of health problems, you've got mobility problems, you've got cognitive problems, because all you've been eating is stale bread. So you want to abate those problems, you want to reduce those problems. So just fast. Don't eat anything. Well, fasting might be okay for a day or 2 or 3 days. It might actually even bring some purification, but you can't, it's not a lifestyle. It's only a temporary timeout. The best thing is, sure, go ahead and fast for a few days, but then start eating salads, fruits, whole grains, whole fruits, whole vegetables, and then your body will assume its natural healthy temperament, disposition. Similarly, you don't want to just pour the poison out of the pot of your heart. You want to replace, and in doing so, clean thoroughly any traces of ignorance, tamagun, by replacing it with nectar. So our process is to chant with our tongue, Hare Krishna, Savaya Mana Krishna Paroda Binda Vashamsi Vaikuntha Vakana. Ambarish Maharaj is our model. He was king of the 7 continents. He encouraged the occupants to sing the names of the Lord with his own hands. He swept the temple room floor. He performed menial devotional chores, and with his sword, he protected the citizen from discord. Even though he was a king of the world, in fact, he would sweep the temple room floor with his hands. He'd make flower garlands. He'd do the arti. Whatever needed to be done, he was more than happy to do it because he didn't think of himself as a king. He thought of himself as a servant. Following the example of Maharaj Ambarish, today and every day, especially tomorrow, we have the opportunity to gather and associate with devotees, to enjoy the nice arti at noon, beautiful vocals and the singing, and to repeat that in chorus, smell the incense and the flowers, and see the beautiful deity forms, Radha Govinda in Salt Lake City, Radha Shyama here in Spanish for it, taste wonderful remnants of food that have been offered to the Lord, and then to spend a couple hours together in Sangha, chanting the holy names of the Lord. And so we're going to start the new year off not by doing nothing, but by doing the very best of all things, enunciating and articulating the glories of the Lord in the service of the devotees. There's one prayer from Kunti. She says, let trials repeat if it means seeing your face, for seeing you means no more birth and death. What is it? No, it's not quite that. Let trials repeat if it means seeing your face. No more birth, no more death in this endless place. Kunti's heart sings, your glories we embrace. Ashitama's weapon, you turned away. Calamities we welcome just to see you stay. For seeing you means no more birth, no more death in this endless place. Anyway, in the absence of Krishna, when Krishna was going away, Kunti consoled herself by chanting the holy names of the Lord, and recommends that we all do the same. Embrace the positive, purifying, supreme activity of engaging in the service of the Supreme Lord. You'll find happiness thereby. Thanks for being with us on this New Year's Eve. We celebrate our New Year's Eve in the morning when others stay up to midnight and shoot guns and fireworks. We do our celebrations in the morning when it's the most spiritual time of day. Yeah. Britta up in Ogden says she listened to the radio station all day at work. Her boss was remarking that she was humming all day yesterday. Well, I've got some good news for you. I have like 5 or 6 Vaishnav songs that are translated into English, reggae and house and dub and blues and hip hop. I'm gonna incorporate them into the playlist here between now and 10 o'clock this morning. So I'm anxious and excited about listening to the broadcast throughout the airwaves as well. Britta also says, no action has always seemed impossible to me. Even a single step will bruise the grass. Better to surrender than cease. That's a good carrion call. Better to surrender than cease. Kelly says, we serve either Krishna or we serve Maya, but serve we must. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema, we're eternally constituted servants. Ballava Chandra says here, you can't just claim to take yourself completely out of the game. You are a person with talents and desires, connected to a God that never tires, full of wealth, strength, knowledge, and fame. So do your duty with all you got so that Krishna's mercy in your life is not for naught. Yeah, I mean, if you take Krishna's talents and abilities and you don't do anything with them, what's the credit? You know, if a man gives you $100,000 to invest and he comes back a year later to see what you've done with this money and you say, well, I, I, I kept it safely. Here's 100,000 back. The man will not be pleased. He expects to see that you've used it, you've invested it, that the 100,000 become 110 or 108 or 112. Simply hoarding or squandering what God has invested in you certainly is not going to be pleasing to God. A few comments about pets. Britta says she adores Pedro. You have to love him for his obsession with me. And Lila says, my cat is writing all over the phone. I think maybe writhing might have been what she meant to say as you're sharing this message about animals and their beautiful souls. Yeah. I mean, how much you miss, how much affection, how much loyalty, how much quirkiness, do you miss when you terrorize the animals and reduce them just to flesh? I didn't expect to talk about that subject, but we got onto it some or other. Shali says, take off the sack. Krishna has your back. Be active and do your duties with joy. Show your love for the flute playing boy. Sweet. Nice and catchy. Beautiful. Oh, lots of good comments today. It's sad to think so many people will spend this evening getting drunk and stuffing their faces as if that's a great way to bring in the new year, filling the pot to the brim with poison. Not, I agree with you. Not a good way for not exactly new, bright, hope-filled beginnings. At least for tonight, maybe they should just time out. Maybe they should do for a few hours from 8 to 1. Just go to sleep at 8 o'clock, zone out, do nothing, experience nirvana. Ladli, I saw a kirtan that you sponsor. I don't know if it was in your home or somebody else's home. It looked very blissful, very joyful. Thanks for joining us. And Mary Leonard, haven't heard from you for a long time. A hearty Hare Krishna. And speaking of Hare Krishna, please join us. Whether your loyalties lie with Spanish Fork or Salt Lake City, please chant on behalf and visit one or another of those temples and call in your total number of rounds by 8 o'clock in the evening, and we'll have the full summation. We'll have full summation for you on Thursday morning. And hopefully we will have at least exceeded the, what was it, 1,900, 2,000 or so rounds that we did yesterday. We should be able to do better than that this year. So calling everyone out on that. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.